Well, good morning and welcome to Elevenses once again. The intro screen went wrong again. I have no idea why that happened. Anyway, never mind. Here I am. I'm Kevin Williams. This is Elevenses, show number 602. It's Sunday, May the 3rd, and this is the roundup of motorcycle news, tips, and views for today, Sunday, 3rd of May. We've got a packed show for you again today. The first story is that two men have been jailed as a Kent warehouse was targeted. They were looking to steal Stark's electric motorcycles, which is actually well, a bit of a surprise really. I don't think I've ever heard of advanced electric motorcycles being targeted before. A rider sadly has died after hitting a goalpost whilst testing a new bike on a football field in the dark. The MCIA, they call for coordinated national action on e-bikes, the illegal sort, whether they are the tweaked cycles or the illegally sold motorcycle equivalents. A couple of classic 16er mopeds have been stolen from a Norfolk Motorcycle Museum. We'll then look at some UK and world news in brief before having a quick look at a 1965 MV Agusta, which sold for £1 million nearly. Ducati, they turn 100. Their CEO says they're facing a lot of headwinds. We'll have a look at a Nerva XE2, which is a e-scooter delivering sort of commuting performance. And then our in-depth section today with the worries on fuel prices increasing at the pump. We've gone over 160 here in London for a litre of unleaded. Can we actually reduce fuel consumption as we ride? Well, the answer to that is yes, we can. So settle yourselves down with a cup of tea or something for the next few minutes, and we'll take you through all those news stories. Right, okay, don't forget, if you have a comment or a question that you want to ask, do drop me a line. I always try to respond online whenever I can, and I'll certainly get back to you after the show if I can't do it online. Right, okay, so let's crack on with the first section of the show then. Right, okay, so basically I always try to start with something of sort of topical interest for the screen and for the first section of the show. So a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about how some research behind the science of being seen. I was actually down in Bognor delivering a presentation once again for Doc Bike in Sussex down there yesterday, as it happens. It was being sort of regurgitated by Motorcycle News as groundbreaking research and said to be behind a pioneering new course that seeks to end the "sorry mate, I didn't see you" collision, rather ignoring the fact that the science being seen talk. It does exactly that. It's aimed directly at the Smidsy crash, and it's been part of Biker Down for well over 10 years now. I've been delivering that talk personally since 2012. Now, I've also delivered the part claimed to be unique, which is that their course is aimed at drivers. I've been delivering versions of Science of Being Seen for drivers for years. Now, both the rider and driver courses, whichever way you look at them, they're based on the existing work of scientists, which stretches back well over 6 decades, according to my own research, which goes back 30 odd years. Anyway, on Friday night, a video from PWR Motorcycle Training popped up. Now, this is a channel I do look at occasionally because the guy has, sort of quite an interesting take on the way he delivers his information. And this one popped up with a rather cryptic title, which hopefully I'll be able to show you in just a moment when I come back to the graphic. That should be it. Let me give you a zoom in view. There we go. No surprise. The title was a rather cryptic. This acquired skill could make you a safer rider. Typical sort of clickbait thing. I don't blame him for using those because people will then click on it to see what the acquired skill is that you need to be a safer rider. So that's fair enough. But the still picture accompanying the video rather gives it away there. No surprise. Well, that's a bit of a surprise to me because the author says one thing that's becoming more apparent to people in the driver training industry is something that we're missing quite a bit in driver training, and yet it seems so obvious on reflection. But in this video, we're going to look at this very important skill. So basically, as a motorcyclist, we don't want to be surprised. And he says it's a skill which can be low in younger and inexperienced riders, although I would say that it applies to every rider on the road. And it's an area that's missing. We do not want to be surprised on the road. Okay, fair enough. Several minutes in, he says, what we don't want to be doing is seeing something at the last moment going into panic mode. The reality is that human beings haven't evolved much over the however many years they've been on the planet, and so our fight, flight, freeze responses will always be the same. And a bit further on, he explains, if things start going wrong because you've thought about it, chances are you'll respond appropriately rather than just resorting to fight, flight, freeze, and maybe getting it wrong. Now, I have absolutely zero disagreement with any of that because that's what's underpinned my own training since 1997. My school isn't called Survival Skills for nothing. And of course, it's the background here to the no surprise, no accident campaign that you'll find at https //nosurprise.org, and I'll just put that up on the comment links for you to go and have a look at it if I can actually manage to cut and paste this. Okay, so let me just get that on. There it goes. Now, I assume people in the driver training industry must include no surprise, probably me too, because I talk about it all the time. But I got to the end of no mention for the no surprise, no accident campaign. But the use of the term does suggest that the sort of the website is and the concept is the source. Now, I always try to reference the people I've taken ideas from. And so the panic reactions element in No Surprise, I first came across from Keith Code's work. And Duncan McKillop is the person who explicitly linked Code's survival reactions to the sort of the surprise mechanism. Duncan and I put our heads together with Alf Gasparo, an air ambulance pilot, and we created No Surprise. And that was, I think it was 2014. So again, over a decade ago. Now, the author also mentions the joy of social media is that there are so many different instances and clips out there. There's an immediate library of watching situations develop and their consequences and results. Again, no argument there, but this is something that I've been mentioning myself pretty much since YouTube came into being. I doubt I'm original in saying that, but it is something I have talked about. Now, I did pop a comment up on the video to the effect that people could look to the No Surprise website for more info, but it did vanish very quickly. So I sent the guy an email. I have heard through a third party that he has received my email, and he said to be considering it, but I haven't yet received a response. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I took a look at the ultra high-tech Tracer GT Plus, the Tracer 9 GT Plus, and I asked a question: how long will that technology stay supported? Now, I caught a bit of a flack here for being reactionary and not supporting new technology, but as a sort of follow-up to this, I happened to notice just a few days ago that Nissan has angered drivers of the Nissan Leaf, which was one of the earliest mass market electric cars, by turning off the app that allows them to remotely control some of the car's functions. And they did that with just a month's notice. And not just for the early models either. The Leaf's been around a while now, but everything built before May 2019, and this includes apparently matching models of the NV200 van, the electric version of that too, will all be switched off. Now, this means that these Nissans are potentially less than 7 years old. Now, what does the app control? Well, nothing desperately important, but remote battery charging. So, basically this is your ability to turn your battery charging system on when you're not at home. It selects for preheating, so you can get in a nice warm car on a freezing morning. And it also controls some mapping functions, which is possibly a little bit more important. But it does really post a warning about any subscription service that directly affects vehicle functions. Now, funnily enough, at much the same time, Amazon have turned off support for their Kindles released between 2007, when the device was introduced, to 2012, effectively bricking them and forcing owners of perfectly functioning Kindles to go onto an upgrade cycle. Now, subscriptions to upgrades to the bike you've just bought are increasingly common in the two-wheeled world. KTM, Kawasaki, and Zero are all ones that I'm aware of. They all offer upgrades that can be unlocked by paying a monthly fee. Other bikes are getting over the airwaves upgrades at intervals. So what happens when the manufacturer decides to turn off support for your bike? Will it be simply your smart self-calibrating seat height and active suspension that stop working? Or will they take the Amazon option and decide that you've actually owned your bike long enough and turn the whole thing off? I think, there's a worry there, and it is a dialogue that we actually need to have. Right, okay, moving on from that, we will have a quick look at the weather forecast for bikers. Now, this afternoon, it looks like it's going to be cloudy in the north. It looks like it will bring some rain to northern England and southern Scotland, but it should ease off as the day goes on. Here in the south, it's cloudy at the moment, a little bit breezy, I can see. Scattered showers, and some could be heavy and thundery at times. Now, Monday looks to be showery weather down in the southwest, particularly in the afternoon, with a band of showers also pushing into northern Scotland. Otherwise, mostly dry with variable clouds, so not too bad for the bank holiday Monday. For the outlook for the week, it's changeable. We're out of that settled high pressure that brought the high temperatures. So much of the UK will be dry, but with variable clouds. Showers around, most likely to be in the southwest and parts of the north. Wednesday is expected to be generally cloudy. Thursday looks to bring showers into northern and western areas, and the east, as usual, is likely to remain mostly dry with some sunnier spells, but the wind is likely to pick up again too. Right, so that's the weather for bikers for the next few days. So let's move on to some news stories. Well, the first one's an interesting one because two men have been jailed following a highly organised warehouse raid in Medway in Kent, where motorcycles worth around £140,000 were stolen in July last year, after a loading bay shutter was apparently accidentally left partially open by an employee. Now, I actually didn't hear about this raid at the time, but I did hear about the court case. Now, what happened was a 12-story gang wearing balaclavas and dark clothing arrived at the Noatum Logistics site, which is on the Isle of Grain, in 3 vehicles. They crawled in under this partly open shutter. They went directly to a specific area of the warehouse where Stark Future branded crates were being stored. Each box was holding 2 of these high-value electric motorcycles. They're worth around £20,000 each, apparently. One staff member was inside the building, did witness the break-in and raise the alarm. Anyway, CCTV caught what was going on. Let me give you a zoom in on that picture, and you can see the gang dragging various boxes towards a waiting vehicle through the shutter. You can just see it there in the shutter. Anyway, police responded quickly. They tracked one of the getaway vehicles. They pursued it at high speed towards the Dartford crossing before it was abandoned. Now, police dog unit then tracked and detained AJ Sharp and Bobby Turner following a foot chase. And 12 of the 14 motorcycles were later recovered by police. Now, prosecutors told Maidstone Crown Court that the precision of the raid, including knowledge of exactly where the bikes were stored, strongly suggested some inside information. Sharp's phone contained videos filmed inside the warehouse prior to the raid, including footage of the loading bays and storage areas, whilst another showed the warehouse in Toria with the caption suggesting no one stopping anyone. The court heard the roller shutters are normally closed overnight, but on this occasion, a bay had not been properly secured, and the judge described the burglary as a planned and coordinated operation exploiting a simple security failure carried out with a level of organisation far beyond opportunistic theft. So Sharp from Lewisham admitted conspiracy to burgle. Turner of Beckenham, he also pleaded guilty to conspiracy to burgle. Sharp got 19 months imprisonment, including time for breaching a suspended sentence. Turner was jailed for 8 months. Further suspects have been identified through ANPR, CCTV and phone data, and one is awaiting trial. Right, okay, so moving on. One of these sad bits of news where you kind of scratch your head a bit. A motorcyclist was killed when he crashed into a football goalpost whilst testing a new KTM 250 on an Essex playing field. So the inquest heard Alan Scamp chose the field so he could open it up, but the area was dark, it was unlit, and the bike had no headlight. The coroner's court heard how his 22-year-old friend heard a metal on metal noise as Scamp hit the post at 10 p.m. In mid-October last year. The coroner ruled that he died from multiple injuries, including fractures to his spine and pelvis, but his death was the result of a road traffic collision. Now, that was sort of a line that, interested me in a sort of morbid kind of way, because that death, unfortunately, will go down in the list of motorcyclists killed on the roads for 2026. That will be trotted out with the safety statistics next spring when they start talking about motorcycle deaths. And should it really be a road traffic collision? He wasn't on the road, and he didn't hit any traffic. I don't know, what do you call it? Misadventure or something? I don't know, but it's not road traffic collision. Anyway, what else have I got to tell you? We've been living under a rock, if you haven't noticed. Oh, let's just shrink that big news down. You don't want that, do you? You've been living under a rock if you haven't noticed the huge growth in the use of non-compliant electric motorcycles and also illegally modified e-cycles being used on public roads. And they're minus registration, of course, they're minus licensing, and they're minus insurance. And it's also well known that their use is connected with criminal activity from time to time. So I think most of us would know this without having to have the motorcycle industry mouthpiece, the MCIA, tell us this. But you might have missed their statement unless you keep an eye on their newsletters. So they are calling now for coordinated national action. Now, over the years, I've come to treat their statements with some skepticism. On this occasion, though, their real concern is actually openly stated, because what they are saying is that this is a parallel unregulated mobility market which is impacting legitimate businesses, in other words, the ones who are MCIA members. And they point to the decline in the sales of new license category L1 mopeds, they're sort of up to 50cc bikes. They're down more than 40% since 2022. And the MCIA says that this coincides with the rapid rise in illegal e-bikes operating as de facto mopeds, which they may be right to say. And they also legitimately, in my opinion, flag up the lack of any clear national guidance on identifying and seizing these bikes from riders. And also there is apparently no mechanism for disposal. Now, in an unusual theft, a pair of classic sports mopeds from the 1970s have been stolen from a motorcycle museum in Norfolk. The two bikes that disappeared were a Super 16, a Suzuki AP50, and a 1977 Honda SS50, which is almost one of the slowest bikes I've ever ridden. They were both taken. The Honda, was actually owned by the museum itself, and it has a registration number attached to it, TVF 755R. So if anybody sees that anywhere, I'm sure the police will be interested. The thieves also managed to damage a GSXR 750 as the bikes were lifted down from head high racking. Norfolk are investigating the theft. Right, okay, quick break while I get my voice back, and let me get the video up. As always, can I ask you to take a moment to like and subscribe to this show if you've not already done so? Every click helps other motorcyclists discover my content, or simply share the word the old-fashioned way by telling your riding buddies about Elevenses they can watch on catch-up. Remember, my latest riding skills articles are always free, and you can get all the links delivered weekly to your email inbox by subscribing to my newsletter at survivalskills.substack.com. Or you can use this QR code to jump straight to it, when the show's over of course. No spam, and if you don't like the content, unsubscribe at any time. Right, okay, I'm back. The latest newsletter, by the way, has a double dose of links to all the last 2 weeks' articles, as I failed to get one out last week due to being busy doing other things. Anyway, on with news in brief from around the world and from the UK. And as promised last year, Sylvain Guintoli, the motorcycle racer, he completed the London Marathon wearing one-piece bike leathers, and he raised £141,500 for the PASIC Cancer Support Charity. His time of 3 hours 47 minutes 46 seconds unofficially broke the Guinness World Record for the fastest marathon in motorcycle leathers, which had stood at 4 hours, set by a David Smith back in April 2018. And the French rider ran the race with his two oldest daughters in memory of his son Luca, who passed away aged just 6 years old last July. One man has been jailed, another being given a suspended sentence after police spotted them riding a stolen unregistered bike in the streets of Arnold in Nottinghamshire. This took place back in February. As they sped, they ensured the police took interest in them by throwing things at the pursuing police car, including a helmet. They were apprehended in a car park. They were found to be carrying knives, and a crowbar was found nearby after they tossed it away. Lee Upton, 20, he pleaded guilty to multiple offences, including dangerous driving, failure to stop, handling stolen goods, and knife possession. He got a 40-week prison sentence, suspended for 2 years, and Connor Kennedy was jailed for 6 months after he admitted possession of a knife in a public place. Sometimes we really don't do ourselves any favors in terms of public popularity, and in Sandy in Utah, a 27-year-old motorcyclist has been charged following allegations that he assaulted a 76-year-old neighbor. Apparently his neighbor asked him to stop revving his bike at 1 a.m. in the morning on March 23rd. Police say the older man approached Philip Michael Clevenger in their shared apartment complex, and he was pushed to the ground and punched several times in the face. So he now faces charges of intentional or knowing aggravated abuse of a vulnerable adult, which is a second-degree felony, and also interfering with a peace officer. Mind boggles. That's a Class B misdemeanor. Now, just weeks after a potential brake line issue recall, Harley is on the path again, pulling back 88,000 bikes. And this defect is to a malfunctioning breather port, which would prevent the engine from venting excess pressure, potentially apparently causing the engine to squirt out hot oil, which could burn the rider. Now, Poland has a popular mountain resort called Zakopane. I don't know of it. I've never been there, but they are set to launch this motorcycle-based emergency medical unit. Now, the idea is to reach the sort of tourist-packed areas of the Tatra Mountains rapidly. It's due to begin operating this weekend, and it will run till the end of September, and it will support the regular ambulances during the busy summer tourist season. It's got a full set of decent life-saving equipment on board: defibrillator, ventilator, resuscitation kits, oxygen therapy equipment, and a portable ultrasound device, as well as tools for controlling bleeding and stabilizing fractures. The paramedics assigned to ride the machine have undergone specialized training on riding in difficult terrain, and they will also hold the necessary qualifications to operate emergency vehicles. Right, okay, another quick break. If you enjoy these shows, why not become a member of my coffee pages? Just follow the QR code and sign up. As a member, you get free access to the latest articles and the Survival Schools ebook shop with instant downloads of everything from free mini ebooks to ebook versions of my paperbacks. Become a one-off supporter and you'll open up the archive of over 1,000 articles. If you buy me a monthly cuppa as a subscriber, there's even more content to enjoy. Right, okay, so let me bring myself back into the screen. I just wanted to mention last week's supporters, so let's get their little banner running. There they are, Ian R, Dave, Hetland, Brian, and Anonymous too. So thank you once again, all of you, for your support. Much appreciated. Right, okay, let's have a look at another, some motorbikes then. And this is the first one I want to show you. Let's get a picture of this one up. Here it is. This is believed to have been raced by at least one, possibly both, of the most successful Grand Prix racers of all time. The exact history of this 1965 X-Works MV Agusta are unclear. It was previously owned privately by John Surtees, but it's believed that it was raced by Mike Hailwood or Giacomo Agostini, and possibly by both of these multiple world champions. Now, Hailwood ran out the 500cc title winner in 1965. Agostini went on to win the next 7 500cc titles consecutively. So this particular bike went under the hammer at the Bonham's sale at Stafford, and it had a pre-sale estimate of 160 to 220,000 pounds, which was generally judged to be on the low side. But I think the final sale figure, 967,000 pounds, exceeded estimates by some margin. It was around 6 times what it was book price was. It's only just less than the outright world record for any motorcycle ever sold at auction, and it's also established a new world record for an Italian motorcycles. Right, okay, what else has been going on in the world? Well, another Italian brand, Ducati, has just passed 100 years old. The anniversary comes as the combination of Trump's tariffs have hit imports into the US, whilst obviously his war in Iran has sent oil prices soaring, which has caused global stock markets to collapse, pushing economies in Asia to the brink. Now, the least expensive Ducati is currently the Scrambler Dark at £9,495. But it's a tough time for a motorcycle company that has focused on the high-end market. Now, even before hostilities in the Middle East kicked off, Ducati's operating profits for 2025 took a big tumble, dropped to €52 million from €91 million the previous year. But it's only a year, in fact, since Claudio Domenicali, he's the CEO of Ducati, said, and I quote, "The 2024 results confirm the strength of our brand and the company's ability to generate the financial resources that allow us to continue to invest and consolidate the excellence, value, and exclusivity of our products." But that was already on the back of figures which showed a drop in both numbers and turnover in 2023. So this isn't a trajectory which sits well with exclusivity and value. Now, earlier this month, Domenicali was rather less bullish. He said that Ducati, quote, faces a lot of headwinds, including, quote, rising costs for energy and rising costs for labor, and the Trump tariffs are, quote, mega because the US is our biggest market. And then he says, what can you do about it? Nothing. Yet he still appears to believe that Ducati are well placed to weather the storm. Well, what's my take on this? Well, Ducati obviously aren't failing yet, but they are staking a lot on an aging customer base. Their worldwide average is apparently 48. It's even higher here at 57, and relying on, as Domenicali said, people aged 75 who still ride a powerful Strada or a Panigale is clearly a pretty short-term strategy. They may be riding it today, but will they be riding it next year or in 5 years' time? They are at the end of their motorcycle buying life, sad to say. And the problem is that Ducati really don't have an affordable entry-level machine. The old parts bin Monster 600. It was very, very inexpensive. It competed directly with motorcycles like the Suzuki 600 Bandit, which was itself an inexpensive entry level machine. And that bike, that monster, arguably saved the company back in the 1990s. So, this exclusivity angle could yet come back to bike Ducati. And interestingly, it's in direct contrast to MV Agusta's new strategy. Now, you remember that MV were cut loose by KTM last summer. And whilst most of their new 2026 machines are still firmly at the end, the top end of the price bracket, the Super Veloz 1000 Serie Oro comes at no less than £62,500. There won't be many people commuting on one of those, but the company has slashed the price of their gateway model. Now, this is the 798cc Brutale 800R, and this now starts at £11,500 on the road, so not very much more than that Ducati, and that is a price cut of £4,000. Now, the Brutale has more performance than the Ducati, and it's actually positioned in terms of price right between the 10,999 KTM 990 Duke and the 12,295 Triumph Street Triple RS. So the equivalent performance vehicle from Ducati is probably the Street Fighter V2, and that is £14,295, and that, I think, is the problem Ducati will be looking at. Right, okay, let's move on to a motorcycle brand that you've probably never heard of. That was it, not the MV. This is a Nerva. And this is a Spanish outfit. Let me just give you a zoom in pic on that. It's a Spanish outfit, and this is its EXE2 scooter. It's manufactured in China, as you might have be aware. But, after last week's news that Damon appeared to have shut up shop and that Verge have been reported to the Finnish police for misleading claims over their solid-state battery, this is the sort of machine I think the immediate future of electric two-wheelers lies in. Now, it's a 125 equivalent machine, so it won't set many people's hearts alight, but it does mean it can be ridden on an A1 license and on L plates. Now, it's fairly long. It's 2200 and let's try again. 2,235 millimeters. I always get muddled up with my numbers, don't I? Seat height is 820 millimeters, and it's pretty heavy at 230 kilograms, which is quite a lot for a scooter. But it is reported to be easy to maneuver, presumably because the battery and the electric motor are carried low down. The machine rides on 120/70 15-inch front, 140/70 14-inch rear, and both wheels get Michelin tires. Twin discs up front, which is a bit unusual for a 125, but probably accounted for by the weight. And you get, obviously, dual channel ABS, single disc at the rear. Suspension is non-adjustable, telescopic fronts, forks up front, standard ones, and twin rear shocks, so should keep the price down. Full length dual seat is big enough for two. The under seat storage takes, I've seen it reported, either a full face helmet or two helmets, which possibly are open face. The display is a wide 8.8-inch TFT screen, and it comes with connectivity features, including optional navigation and diagnostics. Standard equipment includes keyless start, traction control, reverse gear, regenerative braking. The motor is an interesting one because it is mounted in the concentric with the swing arm. As far as I can see from the drawings and diagrams, that's the motor here, and the swing arm runs right through the middle of it. Peak output 19 kilowatts, continuous rating of 11 kilowatts, so that's why it is learner legal. Anything else I need to tell you about it? Excuse me. 3 riding modes: Eco, Standard and Sport. They come via a selector switch. Eco limits it to 50 km/h or 30 miles per hour for urban use, obviously. Standard caps it at 93, which is about 55 miles an hour. Sport unlocks a top speed of 130 kilometers per hour, a tad over 80 miles per hour. So it's a bit quicker than your average ICE learner scoot. Now, the battery is interesting because it comes from the Chinese giant BYD, who you may have heard of. Their electric cars are actually gaining increasing acceptance here in the UK. It is a single 7.83 kilowatt hour. It's a blade unit. It's rated for more than 6,000 charge cycles. That's the equivalent of 16 years of daily charging, or around 600,000 kilometers of use. So that should keep most people happy, I would have thought. You get an onboard 3.3 kilowatt charger, takes the battery from 0 to 80% in 2 hours, and the bike is also compatible with wall boxes, AC, public chargers, or even a regular domestic socket, so you should be able to charge it just about anywhere. So the vital numbers: how far does it go on a charge? Well, Nerva claim 180 kilometers, 112 miles in eco mode. So remember, that's restricted to about 30 miles an hour. So that will be your round the town mode. Stick it in standard mode, that drops to about 140 kilometers. Put it in sport mode and you're down to about 90 kilometers and 55 miles. And that's probably what you'll get if you ride flat out at the motorway limit. There is a safety feature. Apparently, the bike will drop back into standard mode at around 65 kilometers of that 90 kilometers. Now, how much is it? €8,490. So I'll let you view to calculate the sterling equivalent. So it's not cheap for a 125 scooter. And, you know, despite the straight line performance, it's not a long distance mile muncher. But if your commute takes you out of town centres, through the suburbs and onto the faster roads, it's the sort of machine I think is a step in the right direction. All right, so that is the Nerva Evo XE2. Right, okay, so what if you're still lumped with a petrol engine? Well, let's have a look at today's in-depth feature. You know, petrol prices are going up. I was backing off the throttle on the way down to Bognor yesterday. I managed to get the car up to 52 mpg. So how can we reduce fuel consumption on the motorcycle? So that's our story for today. Well, here are some tips, and we'll start with some basic physics. Lugging mass off the start line and accelerating it up to cruising speed takes energy. So does moving that mass to the top of a hill. So every stop-start, every hill we climb, means more energy used, and that means more fuel burned simply to get to the same point. So the easiest fuel saving trick of all is simply to stop carrying things that you don't actually need to carry. Now, we don't need to do what Malcolm did in a classic Ogre cartoon. You may remember this one if you've got long enough memory. He drilled holes in everything on the bike, including his tires. But just dump the clutter. Dump the tools that you never use but carry just in case. If you have a padlock and chain on your bike permanently, if you're not going to use it because you're not going to park, you're just out for a Sunday afternoon ride, you can drop that too. You don't need it. If you've got luggage boxes on the bike that are empty, you can take those off. And more on the effect of those in just a moment. Now, some basic maintenance. Maintain optimal tire pressure, whatever your bike suggests. Now, underinflated tires increase rolling resistance, and that forces the engine to work just a little bit harder, consume just a little bit more fuel. But don't make the mistake of overinflating them, because that could affect your grip and stability. How much do you save? Well, you know, for starters, if you've got your own pump, the air's free. Whilst I couldn't find any data, excuse me, specifically for motorcycles, work with cars suggests a saving of around 2% if you are running underinflated and you pump them up properly. Remember to check when cold. Now, here's another easy way to cut fuel consumption. It's the drive chain. Now, chains are very efficient. They typically reach something between 97 and 99% efficiency. That's power moving from the front sprocket to the back sprocket. So that's better than a belt or a shaft. But I'm guessing that those are the figures when the chain is brand new. I couldn't find any data for this, but if you simply have a knackered chain on your bike and you spin the back wheel round by hand and see how hard it is, and then you replace your chain with a brand spanking new one and try again, you'll find that the new chain rotates a lot more easily. So obviously a knackered chain will sap engine power, and that means bigger throttle opening to maintain the same speed, more fuel being consumed. So if your chain is almost new, keep it that way, regular maintenance. And that doesn't mean grabbing a can of the stickiest spray lube you can find in the bike shop and spraying it on until it's all covered. It actually means cleaning it properly. There are cleaning products out there on the market, and then lubing it with what the chain manufacturer recommends, not what the tin manufacturer recommends. I use hypoid gear oil. And keep it adjusted, and make sure that you have some play in it too. A common error I found with certainly newer riders is that they over tension the rear chain and it goes tight as a bowstring. If you do that, you're adding a lot of internal friction, but you're also wearing the chain out. The way to check a chain is not on the center stand. It is to sit on the bike with the bike loaded with whatever else you're going to carry, and then check that there is a little bit of play in the chain. Some bikes you'll find if you set it so it's just right on the center stand with the back wheel obviously drooping, as soon as you sit on it and the wheel moves, you'll find the chain over tightens. My old GS 500 used to do that. Now, a chain and sprocket kit isn't cheap, but a back of the sort of envelope calculation suggests that if you have a knackered chain and you replace it with a new one, and then you look after it, it'll start delivering savings somewhere around about 10,000 miles after you fitted it for a typical middleweight machine. Now, if you look after an O-ring chain, X-ring chain, you should be able to get 25,000 miles out of it without too much trouble. So anything past that 10,000 cutoff, you should be starting to save some pennies. Now, a little bit more technical, but still not too difficult, keeping the engine serviced. Now, once again, I couldn't find any data to show how a motorcycle engine is affected, but if you've ever bought a second-hand bike that's not been serviced for a couple of years and you felt the responsiveness change after you've had a service, that might give you a clue. Now, data from the car world, and for a carbureted engine, obviously virtually everything has fuel injection these days, suggests it could be a saving up to 10%. Well, we're probably a bit less than that for a fuel injected motorcycle, but even so, that does suggest that there are savings to be had from a properly serviced bike. But check the service schedule, because there are some things you can do yourself, even if you can't afford a full service. Maybe you're riding a second-hand older bike and trying to keep the pennies. You can almost certainly change the filter and the oil yourself. That's not a difficult job. And then you can keep it topped off. If the oil is at the right level, it should reduce internal friction, and new oil, it creates less friction than worn out old oil. Another thing you can do easily is swap the air filter out. If you haven't changed the air filter ever since you've had the bike and it's done 30,000 miles, it will be clogged up. Toss that away, get a new one, drop it in. And again, I would recommend that you get a reputable brand if you're not the original manufacturer's air filter. Don't fit cheapies off eBay. They won't flow the air properly. And if you have the right tools and you can do things like remove the petrol tank and any bodywork without breaking everything, you should be able to get the plugs out without too much difficulty and swap those. And these do make a difference. Some unscrupulous dealers have been known not to change the plugs because they're out of sight under the petrol tank on a lot of bikes. Whip them out and replace them with new ones. They're not desperately expensive. Anyway, moving on from prepping the bike to actually riding it. So here's our fifth tip. You've probably heard the get into top gear as soon as possible mantra. Now that's actually good advice for the average low revving car engine, but it's not a sound advice for a lot of higher revving motorcycle engines. Now, for petrol engines, generally speaking, something called brake specific fuel consumption, which is a measure of how efficiently the engine is turning the fuel that you're burning into work done, which is what's driving you off the start line and up those hills. It's best near peak torque. So check your own machine's performance figures, find out where the bump in the peak, the bump in the torque curve is, and then choose a gear which keeps the rev counter somewhere near your peak torque. And that should give you very roughly the best fuel consumption. As a sort of a rule of thumb, a very vague rule of thumb, if you're riding a sporty sort of 600cc four-cylinder, something like the sort of ZX6R or the CBR 600RR, you're probably looking at 6,000 to 8,000 RPM, maybe a little bit higher even for some of those bikes. If you've got a mid-capacity twin, which will rev a bit lower, probably something like 4 to 6. And if you've got a big bore twin, it'll probably be a bit lower still, 3 to 5 maybe. But take those figures with a real pinch of salt because they really are no more than guesses. Look at your own torque curve for your own machine and then match the gear to the road speed to get you into the rev band to minimize fuel consumption. Sixth tip, check the way you ride. Now, years ago, I did a 500-mile trip with a mate of mine. We were on identical bikes, both carrying camping kit as well. So same ride, same road, and every single fuel stop, I put in around 10% less fuel than he did. Now, why? I guess I was probably smoother on the throttle. I certainly noticed that I was accelerating a bit more gently because I lost a bit of space on him every time we pulled away from something like a traffic light. But also I rolled off the throttle rather earlier when he was braking rather later. And sometimes I was carrying a little bit more speed as well. And it's remarkable how much fuel this sort of aggressive throttle on, brake on fuel habit and these acceleration deceleration cycles consume fuels, and just possibly I was in a more efficient gear too. Which brings me neatly to aerodynamic drag. Now, aerodynamic drag is the force that exists as we try to push our motorcycle through air. Now, aerodynamic drag rises as the square of speed, but it is also affected by the aerodynamics of the vehicle. And unfortunately for us, motorcycles are about as aerodynamic as a wardrobe. So why ride a wardrobe with the doors wide open? Because that's what we're doing if we have empty top boxes and empty panniers sitting on the bike. We're just making things worse. They don't just add a bit of weight, they massively increase the sort of the frontal area of the bike, even if they are behind you. And they add turbulence too, and that all costs fuel consumption, particularly at speed. Now, wind tunnel tests suggest that a standard top box will typically add between 3 and 5% to the drag figure for a bike. Put a pair of panniers on it and it will be 10% or more. And full luggage setup can actually add maybe, well, certainly 15%, maybe 20% to the drag at motorway speeds. And remember, drag increases as the square of speed. So the faster you go, the tougher the drag on your bike actually is. So if you're not actually needing to use them, leave the luggage in the shed. If there are must-haves to carry, I suggest using either a tank bag tucked behind the rider on the rear seat or a tank bag on the tank itself. Just a tank bag tucked behind the rider, I mean a tail pack, of course. Both of these disturb the airflow considerably less than panniers or a top box. Now, obviously, linked to the aerodynamic issue is the question of speed, because the biggest fuel burning force on a motorcycle, the wind resistance, gets worse the faster we go. If you drop your cruising speed by 10 miles per hour, you can cut your fuel consumption quite significantly. Drop from 70 on a motorway to 60 on a motorway, and your fuel consumption drops by around 10%. Because the drag drops significantly. Drop from 60 to 50 and it gets even more spectacular, especially on naked bikes. So there's no trick here, no gadget required, it's just physics happening. And that takes me to my 9th item. The rider on a naked bike is basically a wind sail. And again, as we've said, drag rises with the square of speed. So anything that makes your own profile in the wind bigger and messier costs you fuel. So are there any ways to improve rider aerodynamics? And there are. A small fly screen helps. Snug fitting clothing is a must. If you've got flappy, sort of fabric jackets and things, they've got little straps on the arms, pull them tight and that will help surprisingly. Keep your elbows tucked in down by your sides as you ride, rather than riding with your elbows out. Every little helps. And for heaven's sake, if you're riding at 70 miles an hour down the motorway, don't have a hoodie on, because the hood will blow out behind you in the wind and it'll act like a parachute behind your neck. Last tip, if you really are strapped for cash, number 10 is to consider a smaller machine. Now, for real world riding, a mid-capacity twin, something in the 400 to 500 cc bracket, it will cover the same ground just as quickly. It will use far less fuel. It will cost less to service. It will cost less to insure, and it will cost less to maintain than a sort of 1200 or 1300 cc bike. They're lighter, so they need less energy every time you pull away, less energy to climb a hill, and less throttle to maintain typical commuting speeds. And that all translates directly into lower fuel consumption. Modern 400, 500 cc twins are all making sort of 40 to 50 brake horsepower. It's more than enough for brisk overtakes, for dual carriageway cruising, and for any sort of reasonable riding purpose. I spent years riding bikes in that kind of class. And if your commute's entirely urban, you might not need anything more than 125 scooter, and they'll return triple-digit MPG. So if your needs are commuting, downsizing isn't actually a downgrade, but it's a rational response to the kind of speeds we actually ride at. Now, most of us will probably weather the fuel price rises with gritted teeth, but if you are financially stretched already, every little might help, as the advert goes. Now, that is it for today. I've not checked whether there is still time to register, but just a heads up, the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride is on Sunday, May 17th, 15th anniversary of that event. It raises funds for men's mental health and prostate cancer charities. And last year, motorcyclists from 106 countries took part. I'll also just give a quick mention to my new Fresh Start series, which is going out under the regular Tips on Tuesday series. And the aim is to look at biking's core skills. It's easy to assume basic training is job done, with riders ready to launch straight into the advanced stuff. But before that conversation, it's worth taking a step back and ensuring we have the fundamentals clear, and that's the core skills. These are the foundations on which everything else rests. The series rebuilds from the ground up in a fresh way, not because the old material was wrong. Well, not most of it anyway. I did find the odd glitch. But 30 years of coaching has shown me that riders benefit from a clear, structured approach to the basics. So go and have a look at those on my Facebook page or on my coffee page. So that's it for today. Thanks for looking in, whether you are live or on catch up. You've been watching me, Kevin Williams, of Survival Skills Rider Training. This has been ELEVENSES. Make a date to join me on the next show for another roundup of news, views, and biking tips. And if you are out there on your bike today, and it's just starting to brighten up here in London, make sure you stay shiny side up, and then I'll see you next time.